Okay, let's enter in voice number 2, the inner defender. So, the flip side of the inner critic is actually this voice, the inner defender. And instead of judging ourselves, the inner defender judges who? Others, everybody else, anyone and everyone out there. So instead of accepting too much responsibility, inner defenders actually accept too little responsibility. And so all of their thoughts, all of their conversations are full of blaming, complaining, accusing, judging, criticizing, and condemning other people. So you might ask, well, why do we do this, right? Why is this going on? And again, just like in the inner critics, there is a positive intention. When we have this voice, we're trying to protect ourselves from things we don't like, discomfort and anxiety. And so one way they try to alleviate the discomfort and the anxiety is actually to judge others as wrong or bad or less than. Because the notion is, well, if I tear somebody else down, that's going to make me feel better about myself. But as you all know, that's not how it really works. When you put somebody else down, you don't actually make yourself better, do you? You get better by being better yourself. So another way that inner defenders try to help themselves is by blaming problems on things outside of their control, or at least what they say is outside of their control. They blame it on other people, the government, the politicians, bad luck, that they don't have money, that they're in poverty, that their parents didn't raise them well, or their parents don't care, or that they don't have enough time, or they have too many responsibilities, and so forth. So there are a lot of other people and situations out there to blame, and they will never own or accept their responsibility into anything. So you may ask, why or where does this come from? And just like the inner critic, guys, it actually sounds like judgmental adults we have known. Because remember, as kids, we pattern ourselves after what we see. We mirror ourselves after what we see. And so as kids, we see adults do this behavior to others and we repeat it. So it's like if you've seen mom or dad put down somebody else, right? Well, then you may do it. And they may even do it to us as kids. Again, parents and teachers and society, they may put us down, they may judge us. And there's also something else that as kids, we were sometimes kind of scared or intimidated, and we tried to defend ourselves when somebody criticized us, and it may have been somewhat accurate criticism, but we try to deflect the punishment or the criticism by powerful adults. So it's kind of like when a teacher would say, well, where's your homework? My dog ate it, right? Like we deflect it. So I do want to give you guys a little reminder. There is something called constructive criticism, and constructive criticism is the goods with the bads. And if somebody's doing constructive criticism on you, it's to help make you better. But those who critique you without the constructive side of it, just to kind of put you down, are doing so because they're actually trying to feel better about themselves. So when this kind of a comment, just a complete criticism, comes from friends or relatives or siblings or parents or a romantic partner, it's particularly hard to kind of stomach. But I want to give you a little quote to put this in context. I love this quote because I hear people really have things in their head sometimes they can't get out, and it's because somebody else put them there, but it's not necessarily accurate or true. So the little saying I wanted to share with you is, what Susie says of Sally says more of Susie than of Sally. All right? So people who put down somebody else, whether it's to their face or behind it, it doesn't necessarily reveal anything about the person who's getting the put down, getting the criticism. But it reveals everything about the person who's doing the putting down, right? It says that they might feel fearful, they might feel intimidated, they might feel jealous, envious, scared because somebody else is maybe doing or achieving or trying or risking something, and to make themselves feel better, they put that other person down. So be very careful of how other people's comments get in your head and then allow this inner defender to take over. All right, so these two voices that we've talked about, the inner critic and the inner defender, What do they have in common? And you will notice that they are both voices of judgment. So the inner critic, the finger pointing is at ourselves. And with the defender, the inner defender, the finger of judgment's pointed outward at someone else or something else outside of themselves. The trouble, though, is that we pay a very high price for listening to either of these two voices, right? Because if we're focusing on who's to blame, we're really wasting our time and energy on judgments instead of on practical positive solutions and actions. So instead of moving towards our goals, we're actually just spinning in place, which is not productive at all. I think at this point we need a drum roll because we are certainly ready to meet voice number 3, which is called the inner guide. And this is that wise inner voice that really tries to make the best of any possible situation. It knows that judgment doesn't improve anything, and instead, this inner guide is really focused on objectively observing the situation, right? It doesn't look at blaming themselves or blaming other people. It just kind of tries to state the facts as accurately as possible and kind of ask the question, am I on course or am I off course? And you'll probably notice now, why is your textbook name On Course? Because we want to be on course, right? So it asks, am I on course or am I off course? If I'm on course, fabulous. But if I'm off course, what can I do to get back on course? And so this inner guide really tries to tell the truth as best as it knows at that time without judgment. And it lets us be more fully aware of ourselves and also other people and the situation at hand. And so with this kind of grounded knowledge, we can actually take actions, we can shape our behaviors that are going to allow us to get back on track. So clearly we can see that these voices have a very powerful effect on us, right? So as we look at these 3 voices, please remember that victims, which mean they're listening to the inner critic and the inner defender, they're wasting all their time and energy on judging themselves and judging other people. But the creators, right, who are following the inner guide, are using that energy to solve the problem. So my summary statement about all of this is the voice that we allow to occupy our thoughts determines our choices and our decisions, right? And those determine the outcomes and experiences, our results. They determine the outcomes and experiences of our lives. So please choose your words and your thoughts very carefully. So we've clearly seen that language has a very powerful effect upon us and on our actions and on our behaviors. So it's really important for us to talk to ourselves and to talk to other people as if we're creators and not victims. So what I'd like to focus on now is actually working on changing any potential victim language that we have in our heads or out to our others to creator language, right? And so to do this, we have to realize that there are 2 qualities, 2 characteristics to creator language, right? You see them on the screen. Creators, first of all, accept ownership of the situation. They're not blaming others or themselves. They're just objectively stating what is. And the second thing is they make an action plan. They plan and they take concrete steps, concrete actions to actually make the situation better. So ownership and an action plan. Now, we need to remember that when people choose that victim mindset, they are complaining and blaming and making excuses, and they don't have any energy left to actually fix the problem, so they get stuck. And they keep telling everybody the same complaints and kind of moaning and whining and excuse making, and they keep telling that to anybody who's going to listen. And so the thing I want you to remember about victims is when they do this in their language, not only are they exhausting their own energy, but they're draining everybody else around them. But the flip side of it is that creators, they use their words and thoughts to make the bad things better, right? So they accept responsibility for their outcomes, and their words, their language actually expresses that ownership. And then they actually take the concrete steps to make the things happen. So they have ownership and a plan. And in this way, you always want to be around the creators because they energize everybody around them. Okay, so let's look at an example. Here's an example of a victim. If I weren't so stupid, I wouldn't have to take this dumb class again. So what are they doing? They're blaming themselves for being dumb, and then they're complaining about the class. So let's change this to creator language. So what a creator does is they take ownership, not self-blame, not blaming others. They state the facts, and then they have an action plan. So here they're saying, I didn't spend enough time studying. That's the problem. They're not blaming themselves, they're just stating a fact, and they have a plan about they're going to go to the tutoring center and study, and they're going to work with the tutoring center, and they're going to study the subject. So that is the action plan. Let me give you another example. Here's a victim. If STC would do something about the parking, I wouldn't be late to class. Ugh. STC's the problem, the parking lot's the problem, the police, the security at STC. Financial aid's the problem. Why aren't they giving us more parking for what we pay for? It's everybody else's fault. Nope. The creator says, you know what the problem is? There is actually parking for every single student, but there's not convenient parking, right? We all want to park right outside of our class. So the problem is I'm not waking up early enough to take advantage of the options. So what if I wake up 30 minutes earlier, I can take the park and ride, and then I don't have to stalk people and fight people for a convenient parking spot. That is a creator. Let's look at one more example of changing our language from victim to creator. And here on the screen you see two ladies who seem to be maybe having a little bit of disagreement, and we've all been in that situation with a friend or family, and here we go. Victim mode is, my friend made me so mad I didn't have time to study for my history test. Blaming the friend for, it's the friend's fault I got emotional, and then they were the ones that are the reason I didn't study. So let's change this, and instead we could say, I allowed the situation with my friend to affect me, my emotions, my time management. So my plan of action is, next time that I'm going to get in a disagreement with somebody, I'm going to tell them I need some time to process this. You schedule a time. We're going to talk about this, in 2 days at this time. Let's meet at the coffee shop, right? But in the meantime, right, you're going to work on studying. The studying is going to come first, and then you will work on this disagreement, and we will fix and we will resolve the misunderstanding. So that is a plan of action. Okay, so this week we've looked at mindsets, the victim and creator. We've looked at internal and external locus of control. We've talked about the responsibility model and the importance of choice. We looked at the voices in our heads, including the inner critic, the inner defender, and the inner guide. And lastly, we talked about the language of creators that focuses on ownership and an action plan. So to end this week, I want to leave you all with one last quote. You know how I like quotes, and it's a little bit of food for thought. And so here is the quote. Someone once told me the definition of hell. The last day you have on earth, the person you became will meet the person you could have become. Wow, that is so powerful, right? Such a powerful thought. It means the person you want to become, you have the power to become that. You have the responsibility. You have the superpower, right? You don't want to look back regretting and becoming a victim, because you are a creator. You are a superhero. Make it happen.